to be dragged through mud in front of my whole family that night. Then again, I should have known better. Nothing in that house ever felt like love. We were sitting at that long, polished table in my grandfather's estate, the kind with seats reserved only for the respectable ones. You know, my lawyer cousin, my tech startup brother, my aunt with the fancy handbags, and even fancier insults. Before we begin, drop a comment and tell us what would you do in this situation? Be honest, tell me in the comments below. We read every comment. Let's begin. I had barely pulled out a chair when I heard my mother's voice slice through the air like a dagger. "She doesn't belong at this table," she said, loud enough for the caterers in the kitchen to hear. "She's just a cashier." I froze. Laughter followed. My uncle snorted. My cousin Chase smirked and muttered, "Let her serve, not sit." The words echoed in my ears. Serve, not sit. Like I was a maid in their castle. I felt every eye turn toward me, and for a second, I thought I might actually choke on the humiliation swelling up in my chest. I hadn't said a word yet. Not a single word. I had just shown up, in a simple black blouse and jeans, after my shift at the grocery store. My hands still smelled faintly like register tape and plastic bags. And yet somehow my presence, my existence was offensive to them. I stepped back, quietly. I wasn't going to beg for a seat at a table where I was never truly welcome. But before I could turn around, I heard a sound. A slow, firm sliding across the table. My grandfather, who hadn't said a word all night, was pushing a thick manila folder toward my mother. "Before you keep talking," he said, his voice calm but ice cold, "read this." The entire room went dead silent. My mother, always poised, always in control, glared at the folder like it had personally insulted her. Then, with trembling fingers, she flipped it open. I watched her eyes scan the first page. Then the second. Then her face lost all color. "What is this?" she whispered. My grandfather didn't flinch. "Those are legal documents. Transfer of ownership. Assets. The Hart Trust." My breath caught. He turned and looked at me, right into my eyes. "You," he said, "are now the sole owner of everything this family thinks they're entitled to." I swear the chandelier above us could have shattered from the silence that followed. Everyone froze. My cousin's fork clattered against his plate. My aunt's wine glass tipped over and rolled. I was standing there, too stunned to speak, with 20 sets of eyes suddenly treating me like I was a ghost who'd come back rich. And my mother? She was still staring down at those papers like they were written in flames. "She's a cashier," she said again, this time more to herself than anyone. "No," Grandpa said, leaning back. "She was a cashier. Now she's your landlord, your trustee, and if she wants to be your boss." Then he looked back at me and nodded. "Go ahead, sweetheart," he said. "Sit. You earned it." And I did. But this time, not because I was invited. Because I belonged. I could feel their eyes burning holes through me as I pulled out the chair, the one at the side of the table closest to Grandpa, and finally sat down. My hands trembled under the table, hidden beneath white linen and polished silver, but I didn't let it show. I had never sat at this table before. Not like this. Not with power. The air was thick with disbelief. I saw my cousin Emily whispering to her sister, her eyes darting between me and the folder in front of my mother like they couldn't make sense of either. Chase had gone pale, his wine untouched. And my mother, Judith, hadn't blinked once since reading the final page. That's when I cleared my throat and spoke. "I wasn't supposed to come tonight," I said quietly. My voice cut through the silence like a slow, steady knife. I almost didn't. I looked down the long table, the same one I used to dust as a kid while they held their wine glasses out for refills. But when Grandpa invited me, I said yes. Not because I thought I'd be welcomed. Not because I wanted to sit beside people who've laughed behind my back for years. But because I was tired of hiding. A few of them shifted. I could see Zach, my brother, blinking fast like he was embarrassed for me, or maybe for himself. "I work at a checkout counter." Yes. I stand on my feet 8 hours a day. I help customers clean messes, get screamed at by strangers, and go home with aching knees. And every time I smiled through it, I could hear my own family whispering, "She's a failure." My eyes met my mother's. "Even you." She flinched, just slightly, but it was enough. "You always told me I wasn't enough. That real success meant titles, husbands, or at least a trust fund. But you know what I've got that most of you don't." I leaned forward. Self-respect. And the will to fight for it. Grandpa chuckled beside me, softly, but loud enough to be heard. Judith finally found her voice. This is ridiculous. She doesn't have the experience to manage this trust. She doesn't even understand wealth." I tilted my head. "And yet, I've survived with nothing." "That's more than can be said for half the people at this table if Grandpa cut you off tomorrow." "You can't do this," Chase blurted suddenly, pointing at Grandpa. "You're letting her tear the family apart." Grandpa's voice dropped. "The family tore itself apart when it turned into a pack of leeches. I didn't give Ava the trust to make you comfortable. I gave it to her because she earned it while all of you coasted." He gestured toward me, pride swelling in his tired eyes. "She showed up. She listened. She learned. And she never once asked for a handout." There was a long silence. And then, quietly, I turned to one of the servers, Kelly, a sweet woman I used to work with at the diner before she started catering, and said, "Could you please bring me a glass of water?" She smiled and nodded. I turned back to the table. "Just so we're clear, I'm not here to play queen. I don't want your apologies. But I will be cleaning house. And that includes cutting ties with people who only remember I exist when there's something in it for them." Everyone heard it. Everyone understood. For the first time in my life, they looked at me not with pity, but with fear. And for the first time ever, I was okay with that. I didn't expect to speak again that night. But something in me shifted when I saw the way they looked at me, like they were finally realizing I wasn't going to disappear into the background this time. So I stood up. No one moved. No one dared to interrupt. I reached into my purse, pulled out a folded piece of paper, and slowly opened it. Judith narrowed her eyes. "What's that?" I looked directly at her. A list of every time I was made to feel like I didn't belong. I started keeping it years ago. Chase groaned. "Oh, come on." "September 12th, I said firmly, reading from the top. "Aunt Linda told her tennis club that I was mentally unstable for not going to college. I was 17. Silence. "October 3rd, Mom's charity gala. I wasn't invited, but I was asked to help serve drinks. None of the guests knew I was her daughter." Judith's lips tightened. "That's enough." "No," I said sharply. "It's not." I turned to Grandpa. He was watching me with quiet approval, arms folded, as if he'd waited years for this moment to happen. "February 8th, I continued. Cousin Taylor laughed when I showed up to dinner after work and said I smelled like aisles and sadness. Taylor looked down at her lap. "And just 3 weeks ago," I said, voice cracking slightly, "when I showed up at the hospital after Grandpa's minor stroke, the nurse said only family could visit. And Zach told her, 'She's just the help.'" I looked straight at my brother. His face was stone. "I didn't mean it like that." "You said it anyway," I replied, folding the paper back up. "All of you have spent years treating me like I was invisible. But now you're sitting in a house with my name on the deed." Nobody said a word. Then Grandpa stood beside me. His hand touched my shoulder. "This dinner was never about food. It was a test. I wanted to see if any of you had changed." He paused, scanning the faces one by one. "You failed." He turned to me. "Except her." I was shaking. Not from nerves, but from finally letting go of the fear that had haunted me my entire life. I was done proving myself. I had already won. "You can leave," I said quietly to the table. "The dinner's over. But the way this family operates from now on, it's going to change. Starting tonight." My mother stood, her voice shrill with panic. "You don't know what you're doing, Ava. You're being emotional." I turned to her and said something I never thought I'd say. "I learned from the best, Mom. I learned how to survive by watching how not to treat people." She stared at me like she didn't recognize me anymore. Maybe she didn't. And maybe that was the point. When I said those words, I learned how to survive by watching how not to treat people. My mother's expression cracked for the first time in years. Her mouth trembled, just slightly, like she wasn't sure whether to lash out or crumble. For a moment, she didn't look like the perfectly composed Judith Hart who'd always controlled every room she entered. She looked like someone who just realized the person she dismissed her whole life was now in a position to rewrite the rules. And I intended to. She tried to recover. You've been working a cash register for 6 years. You don't have the experience. I raised a hand. You're right. She blinked. I don't have the experience of bleeding trust fund money into failed investments. I don't have the experience of hiring fake consultants to steal from our family business. And I don't have the experience of holding my head high while standing on the backs of people I look down on. The room was frozen in shock. Even the servers had stopped moving completely. One of them, a guy named Travis who I used to train during my diner days, gave me a small nod. It meant more than words. I looked at them all, Zach, Emily, Taylor, Aunt Linda, Uncle Scott, even the 2 twins from some distant branch of the family I'd barely met. You all made one mistake, I said slowly. You thought I'd never rise. Chase leaned forward, desperate to spin things back. Okay. So you have control now.
Fine. But be smart about this.
Think logically. Don't burn bridges. Chase, I said without even looking at him. You once called me the stain on the heart name at Thanksgiving because I wore a thrift store dress. The only bridge burning here is yours. Aunt Linda stood up abruptly. Well, I won't be part of the circus. Walter, this is absurd. You're risking everything just to make a statement. Grandpa didn't flinch. It's not a statement. It's an inheritance. Ava was the only one who asked me how the trust worked, how stocks functioned, how taxes ate into profits. She didn't just pretend to care, she learned. And when I handed her a 100-page report on quarterly returns, she read it twice. Aunt Linda scoffed, but the insecurity in her eyes betrayed her. I stood taller, stronger. You think I'm just playing dress up with power. But you never paid attention. While you were judging me for ringing up groceries, I was listening, watching, taking notes while you laughed. I walked over to the folder still in front of my mother and slid it across to myself. The assets are legally mine now, and I'm not handing them back. Then I turned, slowly, scanning each face around that table with the calm I'd never had the chance to hold before. Some of you will be removed from the trust entirely. Others will be placed under review. And yes, there will be accountability. No more credit cards on the family account. No more spa retreats paid by Grandpa's investments. And no more fake titles at Hart Industries. You either earn your seat at this table or you lose it. You could hear hearts beating across the room. My mother, still seated, still stunned, finally whispered, "You're ruining everything." I stepped closer.
No, Mom.
I'm rebuilding what you broke. Her mouth opened again, maybe to argue, but I was already walking past her. I stopped at Grandpa's side, gently touching his shoulder. Thank you for trusting me. He looked up with tears in his eyes.
No, Ava.
Thank you for becoming the woman this family needed but never deserved. The weight of it hit me hard. For years, I'd begged for their respect. Now I no longer needed it. I didn't sleep that night. Not out of regret. No, there was none of that. But because everything that had built up inside me for 26 years finally erupted in a single dinner that left my entire family silent and stunned. I lay in bed at the guest suite of Grandpa's estate. No longer a guest, really, but still trying to wrap my head around what it all meant. At 3:17 a.m., I got up, walked barefoot into the study, and sat in the same leather chair Grandpa had used for decades. The folder still sat there, open,
real.
And so was the power. It was strange. All my life, I believed power came from noise, being loud, important, dominant. But I'd been wrong. Real power was clarity. And right now, for the first time in my life, I had it. By morning, word had already spread. Zach texted me a pathetic half-apology. Didn't know it'd go down like that. Let's talk. Aunt Linda emailed a cold message wrapped in fake warmth. Perhaps we should meet privately, clear the air. Even Chase, who once sneered that I was just the help, sent me a voice note trying to act like we'd always been close. I didn't reply to any of them. Instead, I asked the housekeeper, someone they always ignored, to make extra breakfast for the entire kitchen staff. I sat down with them that morning, not at the dining hall where they used to force me to serve, but in the back, at the same cracked round table where laughter was genuine and kindness didn't come with strings. "Is this real?" Kelly asked between bites. "You're in charge now." I nodded, slowly.
Yeah.
"It's real." She laughed. "Guess that means you can fire the rude ones?" "Not yet," I said. "But soon. Because power without change is just decoration." I wasn't going to be the kind of leader who wore a title and became another version of them. I had a responsibility now, one that stretched further than family. At noon, I held the first trust meeting with the estate's attorney, Mr. Lanford. Gray-haired, quiet, professional. He'd been Grandpa's right-hand man for years. He opened his leather briefcase and looked at me over his glasses. Ready, more than ever. We went through assets, pending distributions, and most importantly, control rights. Every signature I'd need to change the structure, revoke unnecessary payouts, and reallocate funding to better causes was already lined up. Grandpa had prepared for this long before that dinner. As we finished reviewing, he gave me a final folder with typed-up changes ready to file. Termination of unnecessary board seats, freezing of certain allowances, and a newly established educational grant, one I requested on the spot for underprivileged girls in our town. It wasn't revenge. It was justice. That evening, the family was summoned back. Some resisted. Most came. I stood at the front of the grand hall, same room where I used to vacuum carpets and polish silverware, and faced them not as a servant or outsider, but as the head of the Hart Family Trust. "Let me make something clear," I began. "This isn't about revenge. I'm not interested in playing dictator. I let the silence carry. But this legacy, this estate, these assets, they're not going to continue being a prize for the cruel and entitled. I won't allow it." Taylor crossed her arms, rolling her eyes. "So, what? You're better than all of us now." "No," I said. "I just became everything you tried to stop me from becoming." Judith stood in the corner, arms folded, silent. I hadn't looked at her until now. When Dad died, I said to her, "You told me, get over it. Life keeps moving." And when I lost my scholarship and started bagging groceries, you said I was throwing my life away. Her lip quivered. She tried to hold her composure.
Failed.
"But every time you called me a disappointment," I continued, "you taught me how to live without your approval. And that was the greatest gift you ever gave me." I turned to the group. "Some of you will be offered a chance to stay, to earn your place. Others won't. The days of handouts are over." Then, stepping away from the podium, I finished with one final line. "I'm not here to prove anything anymore. I am the table now." And with that, I walked out of the room, not with applause, not with praise, but with something much rarer, silence from the people who had never once